This is Gary Swanson and Ann Brownfield interviewing Marge Bercu and her daughter Barbara Bloch at Barbara's home on August the 23rd, 2005. Marjorie is the wife of, and Barbara the daughter of one of Kansas City's veteran garment manufacturers. And by veteran, I mean one of the older ones. And we're doing this for the Historic Garment District project of the Kansas City Historic Garment District Museum. Marjorie, you and your husband, Archie got into the garment business, as you can best recollect, when? He came out of the war and stayed in New York for a while. Was he in the garment business there?
No.
Uh-huh. And then he came to Kansas City?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And Barb, why don't you trace the history of your father's involvement in the garment industry and your involvement?
Okay. To the best that I understand it, my father worked for his brother-in-law, Maurice Garfinkel, at Maurice Coat and Suit Company as a production manager. And Maurice died in 1963. And at that time, my dad's nephew, Arnold Garfinkel, took over as the head of the company and had lost interest in it. And sold the business, and my father moved on to Lan-Mar Sporting Goods. In between jobs at Maurice Coat and Suit Company, he had worked for a company named Lewis Walters, which made ladies' suits, and had also worked with JB Toy Company in Braymer, Missouri, and also Superior Toy Company, which was in the West Bottoms in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what year your dad came out from New York? He was in the service during World War II.
He was in the service for 4 years. He was in New York for 4 years.
And then came out, so it probably been about, well, he got out of the service probably in 45 or 46. Probably would have been about 1950.
He started out as a lawyer.
Is that right? Uh-huh. And he'd gone to school before he went to the service?
Right, he went to law school and practiced law here for a while.
Here in Kansas City?
Mm-hmm.
And so he might have been a little older than the typical young man going to war.
Yes.
But it would have been about 1950 when he came back. The war ended in 45, or some guys get out in 46, stayed in New York for 4 years,
Right.
Came back about 1950. So, okay, so 1950 on. Go ahead, Barb, with your...
I was born in 58, so at that point I think he was with the toy company, because I remember my parents telling me that I had so many toys that I never wanted to play with them. Can you imagine a little child not wanting to play with toys?
Well, Superior was a stuffed animal company down in the bottoms.
And they made a lot of those toys for the carnivals that traveled around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you remember the president of that company? I met him and chatted with him several times.
Rosenthal.
Rosenthal or Rosenberg?
Rosenberg.
Sherman
Rosenberg, exactly.
That was a partner.
And so your daddy was working for him as a production manager. They were partners.
They were partners.
At Superior Toy. And then what?
I don't know what happened there, but I know that there was this stint where he had owned Braymer Toy Company, or JB Toy Company, in Braymer, Missouri, and that was when I was a child also. And then I remember my uncle dying, and I remember my father working at the factory at that point in time. So I was about 6, 7 years old. And then in 1969, they closed Maurice Coat and Suit Company down, because I think Arnold lost interest in the business.
And Frida didn't want it anymore.
And my dad's sister, Frida Garfinkel, didn't want the business anymore. So my dad bought Lan-Mar Sporting Goods from an older gentleman who I remember my dad saying was his Sunday school teacher when he was a little boy. And my dad really loved the athletic apparel uniform manufacturing business because he loved little kids, and they had a retail store within the factory. So
Where was it located? Do you remember, Barb?
it originated at 6th and Wyandotte, And then Urban Renewal came over and tore the building down to make it a parking lot, and they moved to 1800 Central, which was on Film Row. It's one block east of Broadway downtown.
Yes.
And he had that building till that was from like 1972 to 1988, I think it was.
Did he buy the building?
Uh-huh, he had owned the building. And they manufactured 3 and 2 Little League baseball uniforms. They manufactured basketball uniforms. They manufactured gym shorts that were sold all over the country. In fact, I remember my dad telling a story how he had a salesman that sold enough gym shorts in the state of Florida that everybody living there should own 2 pair, which is quite a few people in the state of Florida, and that was way back in the 1970s. So,
But he really loved that business, and yet the factory was there.
Interaction of people. He loved the fact that the coaches would come down and hang out at the factory in the springtime. And, you know, it was like on Saturday mornings down at our factory, all the coaches would come in and it'd be Old Home Week. And you just really looked forward to the conversations. And then they'd bring the kids down, and my dad had pictures all over the walls of the kids' teams. And
He sponsored 8 teams.
8 teams.
Several teams.
8 teams he sponsored in Kansas
He
City.
had trophies down there.
Yeah, the trophies
Trophies,
were wonderful.
How many workers did he have back in the back making shorts and uniforms? Any idea?
Oh, golly, how many were
He had
upstairs?
probably 25 or 30 in its heyday. He probably had, I would say 12 to 15 when it was, you know, just the athletic apparel, because at one point he had industrial white goods where they made lab coats and chef coats and cook's pants and items for like Russell Stover candies for their kitchens to operate, and for just different companies, baker's caps for different bakeries around the country. And I ultimately took that part of that business, which was Lan-Mar, it was called Fretz Brothers, F-R-E-T-Z. And I changed the name of that company to the Cotton Duck, and then that became the business that I manufactured uniforms with for restaurants.
We also made jackets that well, the Royals bought them for 2 years. You never
That was
until they
through
took.
Lan-Mar Sporting Goods.
Yeah.
He manufactured the official Royals warm-up jackets out of the heavier fabrics that they embroidered the names on. I mean, you go into the stores today and it's all done by machine, you know, computer generated. And we actually sat at the sewing machines, and I was one of them, that sat there and actually, you know, you'd heat press the letters on, and you'd actually zigzag around them by hand. And I mean, that's just not done today.
How old were you when you first started working with him, started going down there? Just a young girl, just a kid?
12 years old.
12 years old.
And it was against the law to sew in a factory till you were 17? Or
16 or
Was it 16 or 17 years old? So I would go down on Saturday mornings, and there was a lady that there was 2 zigzag embroidery machines, okay, zigzag machines. And we would sit on Saturday mornings during the season and sew the letters on the hats. And so I learned how to use the sewing machines on Saturday mornings. And I got my speed up by, this lady and I would sit there and see who could get them done the fastest. And so I learned how to operate every sewing machine and the cutting equipment just by going down there on Saturday mornings.
Pattern too.
And it was kind of funny. So I got to know everybody myself, and it helped me later in life, because after I closed the sewing factory down for myself, I became a textile jobber, and I sold fabric to athletic apparel manufacturers around the country. And I would go to the different conventions, and a lot of the people that my dad had worked with and I had met over the years, the reps for the baseball equipment or the mitts or fabrics, I came back in contact with in later years. So it, you know, life came full circle. It was really quite nice.
So it was a lot of fun for you all the time during high school then. You were involved in your daddy's Daddy's factory.
I loved it. You know, they say that it's in your blood. It is. It's just once you're a Garmento, you're always a Garmento.
Yeah.
It's just, whether you live in New York or you live in LA or you live in Miami or you live in the Midwest, if you've grown up and that's been your history, there's a camaraderie there that, it doesn't matter where you live, you can always talk about it, and somebody who has been in it will start reminiscing, and they've had the same experiences. It's like a family.
Was your daddy a sports nut as well as a manufacturer of
Yes,
sporting goods?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He loved bowling and he loved golf
He had
and
about,
baseball.
there were more than 18 trophies for bowling.
Mm-hmm.
More than 18, because we had a lot of them down at the office, and I still have a lot of them at home. And
He bowled 300 several times.
Really?
all of a sudden, he decided that he wanted to give up bowling after all these years. I could not believe it. And I said, "Are you sure?" Because I didn't ask him to, even though he didn't start till 9 o'clock at night and come home at midnight, that night. But he gave it up because he wanted to go into golf. And he became a pretty good golfer. And he loved golf. That was his passion after a while.
Do you remember what year he was born?
1911.
11.
1911, here in Kansas City?
Yep.
And what high school did he go to?
Manual.
Went to Manual High School, and then he went to the University of Kansas City University?
School of Law.
Kansas City School of Law.
It was not even UMKC at the time. It was Kansas City School of Law.
What,
And-
directly from high school?
Pardon?
Or directly from high school, or did he get
I
a?
think so.
I
Uh-huh.
think that's how it worked in those days.
Yes. So he became a lawyer at a fairly tender age, and then duty called, and he went to serve his country. What did he do during the war? Do you remember?
He was a radar officer. He went to officers training school in Florida, became an officer, a radar officer. I have a picture of his airplane, all the men standing in front of it that were on the plane.
So he was a part of a flight crew as well, flying out of where, England or?
He was stationed
Italy, do you know?
in
Up north. Where was it?
Greenland. He was
Greenland.
Oh, I
stationed
see.
in Greenland.
Station. They sank, his plane sank the ship that sank our ship.
Yes.
And he got the Medal of Honor for it.
Is that right? He received the Medal of Honor. That's the highest honor our country bestows on a military
I
man.
got that medal at home.
Well, that's absolutely wonderful. So then he came back and got completely immersed in the garment business.
Well, at first he went into the flour. He worked for a flour mill.
Well, that was
That's what he was doing in New York for some.
Keller, I think is the name of it, Keller Flour Mill. He was a salesman for them. He got the business for all the Safeway stores in the whole New York area.
So it really was, when he came to Kansas City, it really was his association with family
Right.
that got him into the garment business as a production man. And then he learned the business, and then he said, well, I can do this. Opened the business himself, and then followed whatever the market was or the trends were that were
That's right.
gave him a good opportunity to
Exactly.
be a successful garment manufacturer. And when did the business, Barb, when did the business finally come to an end?
He closed the business down in 1988 because I think that's when he got cancer. He had cancer.
Well, you said he was born in 1909?
1911.
11, I'm sorry. So he would have been 77 years old at that time.
He
And
died when he was 83. He would have just had his 94th birthday. So yeah, he's been gone 11 years. It was 11 years Sunday.
was the business during those years until 1988? Because, as you said before, Maurice Coat and Suit had closed down. Most of the ladies' manufacturers of coats and
The
suits and dresses
industry
had been closed.
really started to take a turn, and production was going overseas, especially in the athletic industry. A lot was coming in from China at the time, And then you had your big boys, like Champion was evolving, and Russell Athletics were big at the time. And there was not a lot of room for small manufacture in the Midwest. There just wasn't. And there was a company called Soffee, Soffee, I think, and they made gym shorts, as well as there's another company that was making gym shorts that tried to copy my dad, and they made it cheaper, but cheap was what was happening to be able to compete with China at the time. And his business just slowly started to disintegrate. And I think part of it was his age too. You know, he wasn't out there doing a lot of innovative.
He was too ill for the last few years to give it a lot of attention.
Yeah, he was ill and older and saw that it wasn't going up, rather down. Did he kind of stay with it till it just
Yeah, he stayed with it pretty much until it was just
obvious that there wasn't a business
there
there?
wasn't a lot there. I mean, he just pretty much closed the business. It just,
Did he, when he closed the business down, how did his attitude change? I mean, as a businessman, as a father, as a husband, did it change at all? Maybe he's more concerned with his health at that time than the business.
Yeah, I mean, the cancer pretty much consumed him, and he was really able to put that behind. You know, he loved to tell stories, but he was able to put that behind. And he focused more on golf and just kind of, you know, I had a factory, so, you know, I talked to him quite a bit about what I was doing, and
So he was a now kind of person. I mean,
Yeah.
remembered the past but didn't live there.
right.
Was living
Exactly.
in the present and looking
Right.
forward.
Just like he didn't talk hardly anything about his Army time. He never discussed it. A lot of
It
pictures.
was what it was when it happened, and then, it's
And then he moved on. Well, so if the business closed down in 1988, Barb, you say, well, I started the business at that time. If you were born in, what'd you say, 58,
58.
you've been 30 years old, you're a grown woman looking for something meaningful to do. You knew the garment business,
I
so
grew
what
up
did you
in
do?
it. Well, I came home from college in 1980 and tried to apprentice at a couple of the coat factories, and they really had said to me, you know, we don't want to train you to go back and work for your dad, to
Yeah.
be quite honest. So that's why I took an existing segment of his business that really wasn't doing anything, the white goods industry, Fred's Brothers, and changed the name of the company, and I started making aprons that were sold in specialty shops around the Midwest. And I had a friend here in Kansas City named Saul Erdang, and Saul was with Fashion Seal Uniforms, or Shane Uniforms, and I would make, he had a lot of contracts with like Volume Services, which did all the concession stand uniforms around the country. So we made together, we did a lot of business. We sold to, I did all the Royals and the Chiefs, vending uniforms. I did the Oakland A's, I did the Yankees. It was really fun. We'd go to these places, and it's kind of exciting, and I got to meet the office people there, you know. And then I did a lot of work for Hallmark Cards, their hospitality uniforms. And then I also got involved with T.J. Cinnamon's Bakeries, which Ted Rice had gone into a little store in Kansas City called Function Junction and bought one of my aprons and chef hats and called me and said, you know, I have this little kiosk and we travel around the country and I need aprons made. Would you make them for us? And I said yes. And so I started working with Ted and Joyce, and one day he walks in and he says, we've got this big announcement happening on Monday and I want you to be a part of it. And I said, okay. He says, I can't tell you anything till Monday. And then they announced that Ken Hill had left Gilbert Robinson to become the head of T.J. Cinnamon's, and they were going public and they were going to franchise the organization. And so I made the uniforms around the country for them. And we also did all of their recreational apparel, so all of their jackets, their t-shirts and everything. And Ann's son, Pete, and also Pat helped me with that. They were a part of that, part of my life as well, because they had a silk screening business, and they silk screened all of my uniforms. So that was kind of fun. And let's
I'd
see.
forgotten that.
Huh?
I'd forgotten that.
They were in on it.
So that went on how long, or is it still going?
No, that went on from about 1980 till about 1991. And then I ended up closing that down and got into selling fabrics to the athletic apparel manufacturers. That was an area that I had bought fabrics for myself for for the Cotton Duck, and decided that that was an area of interest that I had. And I went to go work for a gentleman here in Kansas City for about 2 years and learned how to buy fabrics on the closeout market. So I didn't sell first quality. I bought overruns and merchantable seconds and found a niche around the country to be able to sell those fabrics, and had attached myself to certain mills and left the company that I had started with here and started my own company. Had a partner, and it was called DW Distributors, and I got a contract with Champion, which was a company that my dad had run into in his past, and I got all of their fabrics and sold them around the country. And I also worked with the mills that they had worked with. It was a fun industry. When you can walk down, my end of the business was on 6th Avenue in New York between 34th and 40th. And when you walk down the street and you know people, that's pretty fun. And I knew as big as the industry is, it's very small when you start moving up to the top and you start getting into position. It's the same 10 people that you work with, and you either buy from or sell to those same 10 people on a regular basis. And I'm still today, I did that for, I think 11 years, and then I went to work at Sprint. And today, and I've been gone, I got out of that business in like 1998 or 9, I think 1999. And today I still have the same friends that I had in that business. Not all of them are still in the industry because, of course, we all know that the textile industry is kaput. In New York, it's just non-existent, really, at least in the area that I was involved in. But the people are still around, and we still, there's a camaraderie there that's, a friendship that will never go away.
So you must have been one of the very, very last people, if not the last person, in the garment industry in Kansas City, even though it wasn't on the mass scale that your father had seen it. But you were still manufacturing and selling to the trade.
Yeah, and now there's another segment that's evolving. I mean, but they're small shops and they're local, but there's another segment that's evolving, which makes me happy that it's still alive. It's not in a grand scale in any way, shape, or form, and nor is it in a grand scale in any part of the United States, except for I think maybe LA. They're manufacturing big in LA still.
China took it over.
And offshore production, I think, it's still happening. I don't think anybody has as much faith in offshore production in terms of in Mexico and in Puerto Rico, in the border areas, as they had very high expectations. And I don't think, at least from the industry that I was in, that the expectations panned out. Fruit of the Loom, I think they were sold and then rebought, and they're coming back. But I remember when they took their production offshore, and they would bring like their t-shirts back in the United States, they had to have sewers on our side to fix all the mistakes and problems before they could put them on the shelf. I know Cone Mills and Burlington Industries had gone to Mexico to open a plant, and they did not do fare well when they were down there. And I don't know what position they're in today, but 4 years ago they were not faring well. I know a lot of the industry is just, it's so fragmented, and it's sad to see because
And
huge companies that billion-dollar companies that just kind of fizzled. They're gone.
The union took a hunk of it away too.
From here in the 70s.
The union really, well, I know a company here who was the first company to shut down. They were manufacturing dresses. And the owners met my husband one day. They were coming out of the bank together. They stopped on the steps. I happened to be in the car. And I wonder what were they talking about taking so long. And he was telling my husband, he says, I'm shutting down. He says, I can't take it anymore. The union's killing me. He was the first one in Kansas City to shut down. It was Mike Fox.
Oh, yeah.
The very first one.
Well, I've been told by others that that in spite of the fact that the more and more manufacturing is going offshore, it didn't make any difference to the union. They continued to have the same demands year after year for pay increases, and it just wasn't possible.
Well, they also would tell you who you could hire, who you should fire. And if you have any trouble with an operator and that operator complained and brings in a union person to negotiate with you, then the union finds out that that person didn't have a leg to stand on, really. A lot of things went on. A lot of things went on.
And those, Barbara, those niches that exist today, of which you spoke, is mainly very, very high quality, fast fashion
Yes.
business
Yes.
to capitalize on the moment
Exactly.
and very high quality, higher prices.
I think so. I mean, there's what, the Birdies is downtown. They manufacture bras and panties, I think.
Uh-huh.
And then
Today there's
Tomboy.
somebody who does?
Yeah, there's still people
They're
that are
I mean, they're newer,
manufacturing.
like within the last 5 years, right?
Yeah, Asiatic is still,
Asiatica is still manufacturing. But
HTV is still manufacturing.
they're holding on by the skin of their
Yeah.
teeth. Their design team is here, and their stone and sand washing, where they test the denim for different washes. That facility is still in Kansas City. But beyond that, everything else is down in Winston-Salem?
Yeah.
I think so.
And what company is that?
That's the Lee Company?
Oh, yes, Vanity Fair?
Yeah, that's VF, but their facility to test and treat denims, to do like the different acid washes and stone washes and the testing on the denim to see what kind of finishes they want to put on it, that facility is still here in Kansas City. And then their design team for the jeans is still here in Kansas City. But beyond that, I think the rest of it is down in Winston-Salem, and then their production, I don't know where all their production is.
No, they're scattered.
Yeah.
If you had to estimate because you have a good understanding of the textile business and that, other than manufacturing, what's going on, if you had to guess how many people today in Kansas City were involved in the garment business, the conversion business of textiles into an end product, how many would you guess that there might be actually sewing, doing the work?
Oh. Wow. There's not really anybody,
Okay,
except for
so-
a couple of small little factories. Yeah. I mean, Lee Company doesn't actually sew their garments here.
They do
Sure.
their initial designing.
Right, the design
That's
is
it.
here, so maybe their sample department is here. But beyond that, there really isn't anything.
So
And
it is
it's
gone, you could say,
completely gone,
yeah.
sure. It's shut down.
completely gone. And I think Kansas City, if I'm not mistaken, was like the third largest garment manufacturing city in the country for ladies' coats and suits at one time.
Well, they're second in coats and suits.
Second in coats and suits.
And it's estimated that 5,000 to 6,000 people were employed at the apex of the industry in Kansas City, and that's down, as
Which
you
is
said.
a lot if you think about it. I mean, the year I got out of the textile industry, I had a very, very close friend who worked for Billings Freight Company. And they were a north-south carrier. They took piece goods, textiles from New York and Pennsylvania and took them to the south, or goods from Florida and the Carolinas and sent them up north. So that's what their job was, just to go back and forth. And the year that I got out of the industry, which was I think in '99, the freight for the textile industry dropped 50% that one year that I was in it, and had totally, been declining since. And you can just tell by the freight carriers too. There was, I think, a company called Frederickson that took garments and piece goods from the north to the south and vice versa. They went out of business. That like a 108-year-old company gone. And
So the demise of the industry had a big domino effect going on downwards.
A huge impact. And, I think in Florida, like in Hialeah is where a lot of the production still goes on. They did a lot of the stonewashing for the denim in Florida. I think a lot of denim is manufactured in Florida, and I think in Texas. And then there was a lot of shirt manufacturers in the Carolinas, and all of that is gone. The big factories of the 10 and 20,000, employees. I remember walking into one factory that was like a 60,000 square foot building, and the cutting tables were huge. I mean, the whole length of the building were cutting tables. Just gone. I mean, these companies are gone. And
How about the textile business in the South? Is it pretty much wrapped
yeah,
up?
I think,
mean,
from
we
what
got
I
a lot of our
understand,
cotton.
Guilford Mills is hanging on by a thread, and they did a lot of knits. They did brush tricot, so they did a lot for the nightgown and the undergarment trade. Fab Industries, which does a lot of tricot knits, and they did a lot for the athletic apparel industry. They do a lot of laces for the bra and panty industry, and they do a lot of lycras and sheer meshes. They are privately owned still. There's a man named Samson Batimsky that's still, and I think they're the only privately held company still. But their factories and the mills are so old, and the computer systems to operate them are so antiquated. And I've been in some old woolen mills that have been transformed into warehouses, and to see how these buildings are still standing is beyond me. Beyond. They're 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old mills, and
You can't
they
operate like
stand
that
empty.
anymore.
Well, yeah, definitely the end of an era because
And it's so sad.
offshore production and the costs of modernizing would make it prohibitive
You have to be
to do it in the
wrong.
United States.
Cost a fortune to do that.
Well, your family certainly was heavily involved for a long time. Your daddy came here probably in about 50, from 50 to 90, and then you until, didn't know, you say 99?
Till 99.
Till 99, so almost 50 years in the garment industry in Kansas City. Barb, you have another sister. Was she in a sister?
No,
Was she in the
she
garment
wanted nothing to do with it. She got into finance.
Well, I take it that
I did teach her how to use
Garment
a sewing
business.
machine.
wasn't for everybody in the Bercu family.
No.
Bercu.
But I certainly love it, and I love to hear the stories and the people that I've met and I'm still meeting. It was a wonderful time, and I'm glad that you're doing this because it should not be forgotten, because it did make an impact.
Well, Margie, do you have what's your fondest memory of the time in Kansas City, other than your family, when your husband was in the garment industry? Do you have any fond memories of that time?
Just seeing the little kids coming into the factory, into the office, and getting measured for their uniforms and picking out colors that they're going to have on the uniform and the style of the lettering and all that sort of thing. It was just a lot of fun.
I bet it was, and that is lost now, of course. When you buy it,
We had a whole wall, longer than this wall probably, of pictures of all the teams, and of other people. We had Frank White's picture up there, signed, autographed, and it's good memories. I can just picture it all yet. It was a lot of fun. we used to go out to the stadium and watch our team play. We had a team along with the sponsoring the other teams, and we'd go out there and watch them play. That was our sometimes big Saturday night, sometimes Thursday nights. I think Thursday night 2 weeks ago.
Thursday and Saturday
Yeah.
nights out on Bannister Road.
Bannister Road.
Between two stadium there.
And it was a lot of fun.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for the time we spent together. If you got any other recollections, pop them out. If not, we'll consider the
I remember
interview.
playing in the button box at Maurice Coat and Suit Company. That was always fun for a little girl.
To play in the button box, where they had every button ever made, probably.
And it was really cool to watch the seamstresses would hand sew the buttons on. And they could whip them on and do these knots like really quick. And nothing was done by machine. It was all done by hand. And there was a technique. It was an art. That,
That's
it
another
was a
thing,
lost
too.
art.
Those kind of people, you don't find them anymore.
Mhm.
They do other kind of work today.
Mhm. And of course, most of them who are working in the heyday of your daddy's business, or your husband's business, was, these ladies are a little older now and probably wouldn't want to do that
Oh,
anyway.
no, that's true.
But I bet you had a
No
number.
air conditioning
You
either.
had a number of people who worked with you, number of operators, I bet, were with your daddy's business, your father's business, a long time, weren't they?
Yes, a lot of them were. Most of
You know,
them were.
there's a lot of loyalty
Most of them were.
during those years too.
Mm-hmm.
Ann and I were talking about today in business, you're nobody unless you can hop from job to job to
Sure.
job every
Sure.
year, which shows that you've learned something more and have achieved more. Well, in those days, the longer you worked for somebody and the more loyal you were, the more you were respected. So
Mhm.
times have really changed in the way that you're viewed and how much knowledge you have. And I think today everybody wants instant gratification.
That's for sure.
So,
That's true. Well, the good old days, as we knew them, are gone forever, but these are the good old days for some
for them,
people, so.
for the next
And that'll
generation.
continue. That's exactly
right.
right. Well, thank you so much for this interview and the time we spent together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.